It's a brief question, but I think it's about softening resistance, and I don't know how to get there from here. How do I trust that it's safe to allow myself to have what I want?
Try it.
I have tried it, and what I've noticed is in certain areas I'll try it and there isn't much resistance, but then there are other things that, for whatever reason, there is a great deal of resistance, and I'll focus on things, the energy will get ramped up and the desire will get stronger, and then I'll notice that the resistance is still there, so I'll try to focus on other things. But ultimately, it's about trusting that it's almost like I feel brainwashed. I don't know if...
It's an interesting cycle, almost a spiral of confusion, because here's what you just said. How can I get so that I trust that it's all right for me to get what I truly desire? And then you said, I want to do that, but I don't trust that I can do that. And I can't seem to let it be. And so what you're actually saying is, this thing that I keep doing is the excuse that I'm using to keep from letting myself have what I'm wanting. In other words, it's almost like you've practiced the thought of not trusting yourself so much that it just comes natural to not trust yourself. And so you're actually saying, I can tell it's my not trusting that's not letting it happen, but I still can't let go of the not trusting enough to let it happen. And we say, oh, we think you're just making too much of this trust issue, just like we think people make too much of worthiness issues. We think you are psychoanalyzing it too much, and we think if you would just fixate on things that make you feel good, good things would flow. It really is that simple. You don't have to figure out what's going wrong or why something isn't happening. All you have to do is find thoughts that feel good, and then you're automatically letting whatever it is that you're wanting flow in.
But where the question is coming from is, life is going really well. I don't have things right now that I can come to and say, this is a problem or this is a problem.
So you must be trusting in your well-being quite a bit.
And I'm getting really scared.
About
how far can I go and let myself really enjoy it and have what I want without it all falling apart?
So, someone said to us one day, my dog died and I am so sad. And we said, get another dog. And she said, well, I don't want to get another dog because if I get another dog, when it dies, I'll be sad. And we said, but if you get another dog and you're happy, isn't that better than being sad that your dog died? And she said, but I'm afraid to let myself get happy for fear I will get sad again. And that's sort of what you're saying. You're saying, I don't really want to trust enough to let good things come, because then I might stop trusting and I might pinch the good things off, and then I'll suffer a lot more after I've had the good things and lost them than I would if I hadn't had them before. And we say, you have pinpointed really accurately perhaps the biggest piece of resistance in human experience. It is that feeling that I'm afraid to really let myself want. And you know, it's based on something that you really do understand and know. Because what you're addressing here is all of your emotions are literally the vibrational variance between your desire and what you believe or will allow. That's what emotions are. So if you want something and you believe it, you soar. If you want something and you don't believe it, you have more discord or discomfort. So what you're saying is, I'm afraid to increase my desire. For fear, I will increase that separation in vibration between what I want and where I am vibrating. We don't think that's unwise. Our friend earlier was asked almost the same question, or made a very valid point when he talked about, people talk about the other shoe dropping. You talk about, is it possible to want too much? That was his question. Is it possible to want too much? You can both feel. What if I want more than I let in? Won't I be in more discord than if I don't want? And we have a big announcement for you. Ready? You can't cease desire. You are leading edge beings. And the environment produces the desire. And as you relax and roll with the energy, then you are this unlimited being that you are. We don't really think, we don't feel too much in your vibration that you are so much doubting your ability to achieve. And we don't even feel that you are doubting your worthiness about receiving. What we feel rampant in your vibration, and you are not alone in this, is you are afraid to go too far in the allowing of well-being in an environment where others haven't figured it out. Because you don't want to get too far out there in that odd sort of light from people who want but who have not figured it out.
That's actually very accurate, because it seems like it could get lonely.
Well, while there is never a crowd on the leading edge, we will acknowledge that. There are always others there with you with whom you can share. And we understand that while it is that the feeling of aloneness is never about the missing other humans that aren't up to speed with you, the feeling of aloneness is always the feeling of not being vibrationally up to speed with who you really are, you see. And so there will always be those who push against those who have in their jealousy about having not.
Which is something that I don't want to go into too much, but I know that in growing up and looking at the world and life, people tend to, I've seen people who from jealousy do things and say things that it just makes me wonder, how do you not get caught up in other people's...
Well, you understand where they're at. In other words, if you were to walk down the street and find someone lying in the street bleeding from a recent wound, you would do what you could to help them. We know you would. But when you find someone flailing about in their jealousy or in their anger or hatred, you usually don't want to help them, even though they are in much more need of help than the one that is lying there in the gutter bleeding. In other words, they are starving from loss of their connection. But there's something about them overtly thrusting malice at you that makes you not necessarily want to turn around and help them. But that's only because when they do that, they activate defensiveness within you, and now you are two defensive, disconnected, justifying beings rather than you remaining connected. The more you get into this conscious flow, and the more you know that you are controlling the way you feel by deliberately choosing thoughts, then the less you will be out of control by stumbling into situations. In other words, here's something, let's start in another place. When you take the time to tune into who you really are, so that you are living life in a more inspired manner, what happens is law of attraction puts you together with those who match your vibration. So you do not have all of this meeting up with things that feel odd to you. When you make your decisions about where you will go or who you will interact with out of obligation or out of responsibility rather than out of inspiration, then sometimes you do find yourself in those places. Esther had an interesting observation. They are in a campground here that is really rather nice. It is paved, or many of the sites are, and it is a large site, and it is centrally located, which is surprising because usually something that big and that nice is more on the outskirts of the city. And so Esther was enjoying sort of settling in, and she was enjoying the variety of people that she was seeing in the campground. And she mentioned to Jerry that these campgrounds where they are putting their monster bus as they move from city to city is an interesting lifestyle because it mixes people at the top of the economic pile with those at the bottom of the economic pile, in that there are people who are living in tents full-time, there are people that are living in their cars, in some cases rather small, and there are people in monster buses like Jerry and Esther that have all of the conveniences of home and more in their luxury coaches. And Esther said it's an interesting thing how here we all are together and how normal and natural it feels. She said maybe this business of those who have and those who have not is not the issue that we've all been making it to be. Maybe we have another common denominator, which is we're looking for freedom, and that feeling of freedom is the dominant vibration that is within us. Or maybe we are looking for adventure, and that feeling of adventure is the dominant vibration within us. And so what happens is those economic boundaries or barriers turn out to be really invisible lines anyway, that are, as our friend said, as she quoted another friend, who quoted another friend, who quoted another friend, who quoted another friend, that it is all in the eye of the beholder. In other words, whatever it is that you are experiencing, you are only experiencing because of the vibrational stance that you are taking anyway, you see. So if you were to take all of the desires that you hold and you were to transport yourself to another part of the world where they were living in far more underdeveloped environment, you might find yourself suffering on behalf of those people much more than they are suffering on their behalf. So what we're really saying to you is, don't try too hard to understand anybody else's perspective, because you just can't do it. You can't understand really what they want. You can't understand where they are vibrationally in relationship to what they want. It just is really a waste of time to try to figure out why anybody else is living what they're living. As a teacher, your greatest value is in figuring out how you want to live, figuring out how to mold your vibration into what feels good to you so that you can live it, and then teach through the clarity of your example. And don't try to tell even one person how you're living unless they ask you something about how you're living. Don't measure your standard of life against their standard of life and then assume that they need to know something that you know, because first of all, you don't even know if they want what you want. The assumption usually is that they do, but most people, along with the dollars that you attract and the adventure that you attract all kinds of effort that has to be offered and all kinds of feelings of responsibility. In other words, there is a lot that is involved in your world that works that they have decided, many of them a long time ago, that they do not want. And so what is uncomfortable for many of you is to have someone view your life and just pick from it the pieces of it that they think they would like, and then condemn you for having the pieces that they want that they don't have when they don't understand the whole picture. And then you get back into that justifying mode where you want to say, well, I'm working hard, or I've been at this a long time, or this wasn't the first day that I started deliberate creating, or then there was all of and then what happens is you begin to diminish your own vibrational clarity and purity by trying to satisfy something that you don't even understand in them in order to justify where you are, and it just becomes a big muddle. What we would really like to say to you, lovingly and directly and emphatically and from our perspective of God knowing, mind your own business. Mind your own business so much that you don't even care what they think about your business. Great book.
That's the point I'd like to get to, is to not care what they think.
What you think of me is none of my business. Very good title for that book. What you think of me is none of my business. Because if I let what you think of me upset me, because I can't possibly really understand your vantage point from which you approach me. So as I try to understand your vantage point of how you see me, then all I do is muddle my vantage point of how I see me, and now I'm not a vibrational match to my own desire, and it's your fault. We don't really feel that you are afraid of any of that. We really do not feel that you feel any risk. We think that you just sometimes, it's hard not to observe others who are observing. But when you practice it more and more, you get rather single-minded about it. When we first met Jerry, he was talking a lot about wanting to make the world a better place, and he was bothered by people who seemed overtly not to be making any effort to make the world a better place. It bothered him very much that there were those that seemed to be trying to make the world a not better place deliberately. And one of the things that came up on a rather regular basis from him was, I wasn't really thinking that thought until I met them. So how was it that they came into my experience? It seemed like this didn't happen to me until they'd already walked into my experience. And we explained to him that everyone that comes into his experience comes in response to a vibration that he is offering. And so when you begin to view the world through your selfish perspective rather than through that perspective of trying to understand what everyone else thinks, your vibration clarifies, and then the universe only brings to you those that are a vibrational match to who you are and who you really want to be.
And that word, your selfish perspective, has a lot of connotations attached to it, many that are considered negative.
Well, the thing, people who are talking about selfishness being inappropriate are the most selfish of them all. Because what they're saying is, you shouldn't be so selfish as to satisfy your intent, you should satisfy my intent. And what we mean by selfish, let us give you the basis of selfishness, because we're wanting to do a sales job here because we want you to embrace the idea of it. First of all, you cannot perceive other than through the eyes of self. So everything that you view is through your vantage point. So you have a self perspective every single time. And it is an individual perspective. It is a self-ish perspective. It is. There's no way of getting around that. But even beyond that, If you are not selfish enough to want to feel good, then you are not controlled enough in your thought to be a vibrational match to your source. And if you are not a vibrational match to your source, then you don't have anything to give anyone anyway.